Okay? So in conclusion, right, a lot of organizations are cheap, right? You know, going back to the original thing. They're not going to spend any money on something that isn't going to be provably what they want to be doing, okay? They're going to want to do this job on a very tight budget with as minimal cost, because it is going to be a cost, right? Finding an expert. If you want to do this in-house, you're going to want to find somebody that knows what they're doing and how to do it, okay? The problem with this is that there are very few people out there that understand this field to the point where you could leverage them to trust them with this level of knowledge and leadership within the organization. It's very tight to have them. They're very few in existence in the world. Okay? But what you can do also is you can train people internally to become more aware of these issues and dedicate them to becoming the security expert within the organization. They may not be expert level, but they may be good enough to be able to help the company and the organization reach to a point where it's good for them. Right? Educate the people with a clear vulnerability response process. Right? What you don't want is you don't want to be scrambling on a case of a fire and not have a process in place, not know who you need to contact. There's a lot of people out there within the organization that need to know this. Sales guys don't like getting caught flat-footed when a customer talks to them about a vulnerability that they don't know about. Okay, support doesn't like understanding a vulnerability, and so you just want to be able to have that process there. Okay, what activities can you go on? Again, this goes back to the overall cost-benefit analysis that you've done within the activities. If you find an activity that's cheap enough for you, it makes a lot of sense for you to integrate, that's an activity to integrate. Okay. Using guidelines that have already been established out there. I think GNU has a couple. OWASP has some information. A lot of other resources out there have good educational resources in order for you to leverage these guidelines. Okay? Do what the bad guys are doing. The bad guys are doing this on the cheap as well. So can you. All right? Fuzzing is a very good way to do this. Okay? Measure. If you understand what you're doing, you're tracking what you're doing, you can show the progress, understand where to go next, what's working, what's not, and how to fix it. Are there any questions?
Yeah. So we've only got a couple minutes, so I'm going to start out with a couple of questions of my own. First of all, how many people do you have at McAfee doing product security? So we actually have 6 people doing product security working under David, and that's per 1,500 developers. So for 1,500 developers across all of McAfee, 6 people doing product security, and we can demonstrate that we're doing a pretty good job. Most of those 6 people don't really do a lot of auditing. We do a lot of QA work. We do internal training. All the things we talked about here. We generally have about 2 full-time resources doing auditing at any given time. The cost per line of code, fully burdened. The numbers you were seeing up there are pretty close to accurate. It's certainly under 5 cents per line of code, whereas in a real consultancy that's going to come in and charge you, they do typically charge. The price is always going down, but $2.50 per line of code, particularly for a small project. It's certainly been more cost effective for an organization that's going to audit code anyway. And all our external code audits, we still get them done, as David said, to gauge our own progress. But those we get for free. You should really be pushing. If a customer cares enough, most customers will actually foot the bill to have that happen. All right. Those were the things that came to mind for me. Is there anything else anybody wants to know? What's that? About last slide? Yeah. You said the first slide, right? No, this is the last slide. Okay. There you go. Oh, yeah. So these slides, we'll make them available. They're not current with what's on the CD. Go ahead.
When you were wrapping up, you
Right. So the question is, so the question is, how likely is an attacker to go after any particular vulnerability? Right. So. Right. So a couple of ways. First, if we can find it with the tools that an attacker is likely to use. So fuzzing is one of the most important things we do. Web scanning, if we had any web apps, would be something that we'd factor in there as well. And then when you're actually doing a code audit, which we do pretty extensively, we'll basically, that does become experience-based to figure out whether it's likely that fuzzing fuzzing could possibly turn up that bug. And usually the answer is no. Otherwise, we would have found it during QA. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm wondering why you didn't use reduced product sales then.
That's a very difficult metric to actually track.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So
is a direct correlation between the announcement of security vulnerability and the stock price.
Exactly.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah. I mean There's generally sales in an enterprise organization in particular tend to be very lumpy, right? I mean, there's never going to be any correlation to the vulnerability announcements and your sales. Generally, if a customer is unhappy with security, that shows up at renewal time, which is usually well down the line. So looking at the stock price is the only way that you might actually see some evidence of what the outside world really thinks about it, based on whether there's a immediate cause-effect relationship. It doesn't always mean there is a cause-effect relationship. A lot of times it's probably other external factors, but like the market was just down in general that day. It happens a lot, but it's the most quantifiable thing that anybody could show you right now. So that's one of the problems of factoring in brand damage to the whole problem. It's just it's very subjective, and the rest of it we can put numbers to, though.
Well, I would think that exit polling on why customers don't renew would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
fairly reliable.
So and we do win-loss reports, and I can guarantee you that so in product management, security has never come up for us in a win-loss, but that doesn't mean that customers don't get mad about that kind of thing or make choices partially based on those kinds of things. It's too far after the fact to really be a good piece of data. So, go ahead.
So one challenge that I have in this process is risk analysis has always been traditionally a combination of probability and impact to determine what the risk is. So when you go to an organization, you say, I've analyzed this risk and I'm dealing with the probability that something will happen is this and the impact is this.
Yeah.
The reality is, like you said, it's meaningless, right? Nothing's really going to happen. If I tell them they should patch this in 3 weeks because that's the probability that something will happen, it never really does happen. And you start losing political collateral at that point.
Yep.
Because the way you've been traditionally doing this risk analysis doesn't translate to the people who are waiting for this problem to happen.
Right.
And I'm not really sure how to.
Right. So the observation was that if you take the traditional risk management formula and try to factor in the probability of something happening, people just generally go like this in determining the probability, and they're almost always wrong, right? Because the probability is almost always zero for all of these things. And so I think that you want to be honest and upfront about that. And so the only things where there are significant probabilities attached to it are the things that are low-hanging fruit. And by that I mean your black box tools are going to be able to find them, right? And so the probability is still fairly low in any given month, right? It can take a while before somebody targets you, and that's going to be based on your brand. It's going to be based on the product and how prominent it is. So for instance, we prioritize internally what we look at based on how likely somebody is to go audit it, and honestly how likely somebody is to care if there's a security problem in that product. Like if it's a product that only runs on some obscure operating system, and we have stuff like that, then we may not have looked at it, or we may not have spent much time on it. So I think that trying to apply the risk management formula isn't a really convincing way to sell this up unless your probabilities are all either zero or they're like 0.05 for the stuff that you could find in a black box manner, right? So, the way that we like to look at the problem that works very well is to show what you're spending anyway. Whether you're doing it because you have some sort of processes or not, and show what you could get if you spend the same amount of money that's demonstrably more secure, right?
I think the only time you can actually play the probability game is if a new attack is becoming more and more popular, or if a new attack has been recently published and you're seeing more evidence of it out there. And you can say openly, this is new, this is fresh, this is what's out there, and that's what you tell your customer.
How do you manage what expectations? Knowledge retention. Oh, so how do you manage knowledge retention and training? Measure it. Okay, so you measure knowledge retention by quizzing people. You give them a quiz, and you give it to them after you give them the training. Pick a selection of the people, give them the quiz 3 months after they get trained. Give them the quiz a year after they get trained. You'll be pretty surprised what you see, particularly if you don't give them multiple choice questions. You give them like short answers. Right. That's going to give you much better accuracy.
But if you build the technical training and you have actual evidence and real problems in there for them to go back and research and look so that they know where to look it up, that's your only way to combat that loss.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time, everybody.